Welcome, fellow riders of the hypnotic storm. This is the Brain Software Podcast, episode number 136, coming to you from Toronto, Canada, and I'm Chris Thompson. Today, Mike Mandel and I will be exploring the architecture of change. So stay tuned, and we'll do the rest.
Once in every man's life, he recognizes there's a structure worth having in a world worth living, even though the recognition of which will only stockpile future renditions of a song it's no longer worth singing, to a group of ne'er-do-wells and rapscallions who refrain from ever asking when, to the shills and bone jesters to whom Matt Crunkhorn alone can exist in a state of pure and reasonable violence, I mean violins, because you don't need a curved razor. What you need, bucko, is a haircut.
Damn your eyes, he's right, which of course begs the question, whatever happened to that old tranquility we used to know? These are days of victory! So welcome to the Smell-O-Vision screen, wearing Dune Cologne by Christian Dior, the gleaming yellow jacket wasp of wizardry.
That's me.
The jack-o'-lantern of jackassery, the human hand grenade of hetero-action, and the last man standing in the hypnotic battle royale, Mike Mandel.
Yes, Chris, here we go with the Fritz and Jeff show one more
Fritz
time.
and Jeff show, oh, I love it. And
Buddy, I'm up for this. It was raining like crazy at our cabin last night. Just like raining like a crazy monkey.
Mike, it's been raining all over the world. Yes,
That's
because
good, Chris.
This is the hypnotic storm.
It is.
It is spreading.
What are we talking
All right.
about today, dude?
Today's podcast, for those interested in
For those
the
who are
idea,
actually interested,
for those
yeah.
interested, keep listening, because it'll be exactly the sort of thing that you're interested in.
Yeah, that's right.
Today's podcast is going to be a mini version of a recent course that we just released called The Architecture of Change.
And where do we teach that,
We
Chris?
taught that Hypno Thoughts Live 2019 in Las Vegas. It was a one-day class all about how to run hypnotic sessions, a blueprint for everything from before you ever meet the client, getting a sense of their issues, deciding whether or not it's something you even want to help them with, making sure that they are committed to change, through to having them come to your office, doing all the intake, doing the change work, checking your work, giving them homework assignments, sending them off, dusting them off, sending them home. And I knew you were going to laugh at that. And of course, the follow-up. It's a blueprint for all of that. Now, we covered it in an 8-hour class. It is currently edited down to a 5-hour video class, which you can purchase if you want to. But this is sort of going to be a miniature version.
Yeah, taster
some of the
on it.
high points.
Useful stuff.
Yeah, useful stuff for people. Now, if you're a hypnotist, it'll help you. It'll help you come up with a structure for running sessions. But if you're any other kind of people helper, a coach, a therapist, it'll still probably add
a social worker.
I think
Yeah.
it'll add a lot of value. So we're going to jump in. That's the topic of the day. But
Well, let's
before
do any
we get
promotional
there,
first. Promotional
Right.
material. We got one we got to mention.
Yeah, we're going
We
to
have
keep
some spots left.
We're going to keep this short. We traditionally have been teaching 3 Architecture of Hypnosis classes per year in Toronto. And the November class is coming up soon. So as of the published date of this podcast, if we're on schedule, it will be October 25th, 2019 when we release this. So there are about 4 weeks until the November class. So the November class runs for 5 days in Toronto, November 22nd through 26th. This is our flagship live training, the Architecture.
And let's just say this is taught at St. Michael's College,
University of Toronto
University
campus,
of Toronto, and
right near Yorkville,
right
beautiful
downtown.
neighborhood.
Huge cosmopolitan city. Toronto is the 3rd largest city in North America after New York and LA. And multicultural, tolerant, fantastic. You will love Toronto if you've never been, and you will love our training. Come out and spend a week with us. Have a life-changing event. Become an amazing hypnotist and hang out with us a lot.
There's a reason why people keep saying that this 5-day experience changes their lives.
Enough said. Chris?
MikeMandelHypnosis.com/events is where you can find out everything that we're doing, including the November hypnosis class.
Nice.
All right.
Do you see how once you started the URL, how I just jumped out? I even moved away from the microphone so I wouldn't be tempted.
Yeah, you had a habit of interrupting every time, which is Cured. You're cured, Mike. All right.
Okay, let's get to the think tank words of the day. And again, since I'm at the cabin with my iPad Pro, when I set this all up, I went online to a random noun generator, put in 3 nouns, and I always take whatever I get.
Oh, I'm excited by these. I'm looking at the notes. I'm looking at the notes.
Academics.
Okay.
The second word is dioxide.
Academics.
And the third one is diving.
Oh, man. Okay, so only because these are on, academics and dioxide, as I look at the computer screen here, are on one line. And then the word diving shows up on the next line. Oh, okay. So when I saw it, here's what my brain immediately went to. Of course, reticular activating system.
Why isn't mine like that?
Because it's just different orientation.
Okay.
That's all, just different screen widths. But anyway, academics and dioxide. So here's what happens for me in my brain. I am, of course, a big fan of all things Elon Musk. And in the case of his space exploration company called SpaceX, he did a big presentation on their Starship, which is a big spacecraft, I suppose is the right word here. And there's all these armchair academics pointing out, all the different problems that they're going to have.
Why it won't work.
And here's Elon Musk just freaking doing stuff. Yeah. Okay? Doing stuff. He's been doing it for a long time.
Up there, Chris? What's he building?
So he's landing rockets. He's building bigger rockets and better engines than anyone ever has, and doing stuff while the academics sit around and whine and complain about, whatever.
What about the people who say he never actually put them into space at all because the views of when they are landing back on the launch pad are so perfect that they must be CGI?
Oh, yeah, of course, right. Yeah. Anyway, the reason that academics pointed to Elon Musk in my mind, and the whole doing versus thinking and planning and talking, was the other word, dioxide.
Okay.
So interestingly, because they want to fly to Mars and they need to be able to fly home.
What a weird discussion.
They've got to be able to make fuel on Mars or on the moon or whatever. Now, this is a long way out,
right?
But it just so happens that Mars has an atmosphere heavy in carbon dioxide, CO2, right, and they have a lot of frozen water, H2O. And there is a well-known chemical process by which you can take water and carbon dioxide and make methane gas and oxygen. Right. Which is what you need to combust, right? So it's very interesting anyway. And then the diving part, not really sure, but you know what? It does kind of tie in. When I was about 17 years old, and I was a lifeguard. And when we had a break, there was a diving practice from the competitive diving team. All right. And of course, us lifeguards, the guys at least, we were looking at these female divers going, wow, they're just beautiful. I love that, right? And of course, each of us had a crush on one of them. And I remember we thought it would be impressive if we would do a 1.5 off the 10-meter tower, then we would earn their respect or something. Anyway, one time in my life, Mike, with no diving skills really whatsoever, I did a 1.5 somersault. That was really a 1 3/4 off the 10-meter tower. That sounds
like an impact problem.
Yeah, it was very painful. But I'll tell you, they thought it was just hilarious.
Did the lawn tree bloom and ease you of all of this testicular injury?
I did briefly date that diver.
No, but how does this tie into hypnosis? Well, I'm saying the academics, I find a lot of academics spend way too much time reading about hypnosis, talking about hypnosis, and not enough time doing hypnosis.
Thank you. Yeah,
that's been my experience, and a lot of academics agree with me.
Dioxide.
Dioxide, that's kind of interesting.
They spend too much time breathing their own exhalation.
Wow.
There you go.
Okay, that's interesting because the lungs are actually the exhaust of the human body, not
and if
what
you just
one might
dive
think.
into it and do
Excuse me. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, excuse me.
Just dive in.
And the other one is diving. Yeah, diving. Let's dive right into the material here. And I want to ask you, let's do the first of many Linda reports. And I'm asking, are there any Linda reports response to our throwing down of the cosmic gauntlet a couple of podcasts ago?
No, Mike, we have not yet heard back from Linda.
So the Linda report is null and void today.
All right, there we go. All right, let's move on with the architecture of change. So we've got a bunch of talking points here. We can't possibly do it justice in a short podcast.
Give some useful things if you're seeing clients. One of the first things is, this is my beware of list. And by that, I mean, when you are planning on dealing with a client for whatever it is, a phobia, chronic anxiety, chronic pain, whatever, it really makes no difference. Or maybe even if it's probably not so much generative change when they want to do something better, but usually remedial change where you're fixing something or actually facilitating them fixing something, because we really don't fix anything. We just sort of help them do it or show them how. We help people, as Jason Linett says.
That's right.
Watch out for the client who says to you, and I ran into this when I had my office in the beaches in Toronto many years ago on the shores of Lake Ontario in the 90s. A guy came in, he had some issues. He came in with a big grin, sat down and said, well, I've already seen Richard Bandler, John Overdurf, Tad James, and Steve Andreas, like a list like as long as your arm. And he said, and they couldn't help me, and now it's your turn.
Yeah.
And you know my response
and
was,
it's
Chris?
not always that exact wording, but you get the idea, right? Well,
Right.
I went to this person, this other person, and they couldn't help me, and now I want to know, can you help me?
Right, and some people collect therapists.
This is probably a good indicator that the person is not taking responsibility for their own change.
It can even be perceived, yes, or it can even be perceived as a challenge. You know, I've got such...
I can resist you too, ha ha.
I'll even pay you to prove that I can resist everything you're going to do, which is kind of ridiculous. But I would have loved to have said that I did the Milton Erickson thing and shouted, get out of my office, but I didn't. I just said, sorry. I'm not going to be your next failure. You know, some people collect therapists. So if it's a challenge, don't waste your time. And the reason some people say, well, you know, maybe you can help. No, I don't waste my time.
You don't mean if it's a challenge. You mean if they are challenging
they're issuing
you.
a challenge, that's the point. Right. Not if
they're not treating themselves as working with you.
Right. And you're right. It isn't if the issue is challenging. I mean, some of the things I worked with have been insanely challenging, but they have been able to resolve them.
Getting out of bed in the morning is a difficult challenge, Mike. I think I'm
6:30 this morning you passed. 2 hours to get here. But anyway, it's you can't help people who don't want to be helped. You can't help people who are not at threshold, and you certainly can't help people who are throwing down a glove and saying, you know, okay, let's see you. You know, let's see you help me. Nobody else has been. Who needs that? It's the same people, weirdly, Chris, who, when you do a magic or a mentalism effect for some people, they don't recognize it is entertainment.
Yeah.
That is the point.
They need to undermine it and prove it wasn't real. Like,
it's an art form.
Yeah.
And I've met people who, you know, you're doing an effect and they're taking the cards out of your hands and shuffling them and grabbing things. It's like, this guy was a speaker who was doing this with me. And I said, how well would you speak if I kept jumping up in the audience and yelling, you suck?
Yeah.
You know, you've got to let the person make their presentation. And some people see magic and mentalism as an intelligence test, that if you're trying to get them, and you know, if you fool them, that they've somehow failed and it's them against you. Well, there's people who treat therapy the same way, unfortunately. So beware those who are testing you. What?
You just stand in the back of the room and, you know, somebody's doing a speech and you just stand up and yell, nice use of comic relief, you know.
You start analyzing it, breaking it down. Now, the other thing that I find really...
Hold on, before we get there.
All right,
let's remind people, because again, our audience isn't all hypnotherapists and all that. So this whole idea of if somebody is challenging you, remember, if you want to help somebody make some change, if you're attempting to influence anyone in life, make sure that you're building rapport. You're not positioning what you're looking to have them do as a challenge to them. Be on the same side of the table. Build rapport with the person. This is a universal lesson. Okay, next.
Yes, of course it is. Now, another thing I find is when I would see clients, and I really don't anymore, I see the occasional person on Skype or Zoom, but that's it. I don't want to, because I just did a lot of it, and I like teaching far more. And there's great people out there I can refer to, many of whom are my students. So,
all right, with that excuse out of the way.
One of the things I would always check is on an intake form, I'd find out what kind of medication they were taking, if any. Now, if someone's habitually taking Advil or something because they've got sore joints, I'm not going to be too worried about that. But if somebody's taking drugs that are affecting their mental state, if they're taking things like selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors like Prozac and things like that, I don't care too much if they're taking Viagra or Cialis. I mean, that's not really of interest to me. But if they're taking things that are affecting their mental state, they're actually blocking ego states, according to Gordon Emerson. And I think he's right. Remember, if you have something that isn't dealt with, and that ego state that is vaded, that is wounded, traumatized with fear, anger, sadness, trauma, whatever it is, does not want to become executive, because when it does, you feel bad. People learn that by taking things like Prozac or self-medicating with alcohol or marijuana, whatever, they prevent that ego state from becoming executive. And that's the one that's got to be treated. So if I've got somebody who's got a really complicated symptom profile, And a lot of it is tied in with them being on 4 different medications, often to offset the effects of other medications. I'm not going to touch that because I'm not even dealing with the real person. I'm dealing with this projection that's coming out of all their drugs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so what do you tell a person like that? I thankfully haven't had that type of situation pop up too many times, but if somebody's on a bunch of different drugs and you're concluding it just might be a waste of my time because their mental state is so screwed up from all these drugs.
Right.
So what should that person do to get help then?
Well, first of all, I'm obviously not going to say stop taking your meds.
Yeah, you can't.
I'm never going to say that. No one should stop taking their medication without the full permission and knowledge of their primary healthcare physician. I mean, that's just a no-brainer. But what I would say, I wouldn't say that it'll be wasting my time. I'll tell them you'll be wasting your time and money. And they typically spring the, well, it wouldn't hurt to try thing at that point, or did. And I would say, actually, it will, because I have very, very limited time. I don't know how many years I have on earth apart from that. And I have a lot of people clamoring who I was seeing a lot of clients back then. It's pushing someone else out who may be helped very, very quickly with a serious problem. So I can't, I'll send them back to their doctor.
So how does that person get help?
I don't know, but it won't be from me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I have
We'll
to
leave it
close
at
that
that.
door. Yeah.
We'll leave it at that. Yeah. So it's really just about your choice in being selective and who you want to work with.
Yeah.
This is really the main point that comes out of it.
And obviously, serious mental illness is not something you're going to want to deal with. We don't fix mental illness. Like, Chris, you've had people who said to you, can you help me with my depression? Now, first of all, you're not doing any kind of diagnosis yourself.
Yeah, I'll always ask the person if they have been clinically diagnosed with depression. And if they say yes, then I say, I can't work on your depression, but I can teach you to be happier.
Which is
great. And if that happens to affect your clinical diagnosis of depression, that's not my
Everybody's
fault.
happy. And the great thing is, even your wording there is brilliant, which makes me presume you must have gotten it from me at some point. But you said, teach you how to be happier.
I can teach you, exactly.
Not make you happier.
I am not the boss of your brain.
Yeah.
I cannot
You're not the
do
boss
anything
of me.
magic. I can teach you stuff. And then if they say that they haven't been clinically diagnosed, I say something along the lines of, I suggest that if you haven't been clinically diagnosed with depression, maybe select a different label.
Do you mean if you haven't been diagnosed with clinical depression?
That's what I mean,
Okay,
yeah. If you haven't been diagnosed
Precision
by
language.
an expert who has the capability to diagnose you.
In other words, a doctor or
then,
a psychologist.
Then don't use that word because that is a clinical term.
That's right. That's very
so
good.
give yourself a different label. How about we call it sadness instead?
Yeah, you can help with that.
Right.
The thing is, anything where it's serious mental illness, run unless you're qualified. I mean, there's psychotherapists out there who I greatly respect, like Nancy Hunter and David Fairweather. They're excellent therapists, and they can deal with pretty well anything that's thrown at them, and they're licensed to do so. But if I get somebody sitting across from me and he's I'm not going to work with that guy,
We want to work with, for the most part, we want to work with everyday problems that people are dealing with.
Yeah, for sure. So be very, very careful.
Anxieties, cravings,
help people feel better. Tony Robbins
worries,
put it well.
fears.
Think what you will of Tony Robbins. He did a great job in bringing NLP out to the average person, and then his neuroassociative conditioning. But one of the things he talks about is this very thing. It's making people feel better or helping people feel better because everybody wants the same damn thing.
Yeah,
no matter what they want to feel better.
Yep, and everybody deserves to have an awesome life.
Well, let me just see this. I think you got to be careful too about dealing with pain without a doctor's permission.
Right. We've always told people don't deal with pain unless you have a doctor's permission. Now, we know other people are doing different things and asking the unconscious mind first, does this pain have any useful purpose?
Right.
And if the unconscious mind answers no, then okay, we'll deal with the chronic pain, for example.
But I would still get a doctor's reference and permission. You got people like Stephen Blake, is it, with Old Pain to Go?
Yes, it's Stephen Blake.
Excellent guy and really good at his stuff. Freddie Jacquin, of course, with the arrow technique, and Anthony Jacquin. There's some tremendous techniques out there, but again, don't
protect yourself.
Protect yourself. Cover your butt. We don't want people getting in trouble, and we want everybody's ecology to be good, especially the people who come in to see us.
Absolutely.
Or did.
Okay, so let's move on to the framework. We always talk about the framework called the Mandel model of therapy.
Right.
And this Mandel model is a useful framework to be thinking about change work. So, Mike, you want to go through that real quick?
Well, it's really just, like you said, it's a framework. It's just a useful way of looking at the client and the client's issues and the session. And I'm not going to be going in with any kind of plan, I have this presumption right out of Greek mythology that the client is stuck in a labyrinth, and a labyrinth is a maze. It was the one created by Daedalus in Greek mythology. The idea being it's a maze that you cannot get out of. I think it was Theseus and the Minotaur was the story. Minotaurs are scary. They're half bull, half man, sort of like the goat
like
man
dragons.
in the Mindscaping. Yeah, scary things. So they're stuck in a labyrinth, and there's dark corners, and there's false turns, and there's doors that lead nowhere, and it's dark and scary, and you're alone. And that's what it's like. And it's with that model, as much as we would love to grab people and drag them out of the labyrinth and into the sunlight and kill their monsters, we can't do that because they'll just wind up there again. We have to empower people. And if we think of therapy and coaching as empowering someone to kill their own minotaur, their own monsters, and find their own way out of the labyrinth, then it will last, then it will stick. So we can illuminate the way and let them have the tools, give them the tools to fight and get out again.
Okay, so and part of that, of course, is putting them at cause. Right. Well, that's the next step.
What do you mean by put at cause for those who don't understand it?
Put at cause, this is part of the being at effect and being at cause. It's the base level of Dilt's logical levels, and it is the level of environment. And if you are at effect, the world is happening to you, and it's blame the environment, blame the people around you, blame
always
the
happens
situation.
To me. I'm powerless.
Never take responsibility because that'll make your life suck, so then you can continue to complain about how bad your life is.
Life is happening to you, and
so
it
you
sucks.
have to take responsibility, which means being at cause.
Right.
You are in the middle of the causality model.
And because we're saying that they're at cause, they're the ones who are going to make the change. They're the ones who are going to be empowered in this labyrinthine model.
They got to pick up the sword and slay the Minotaur. They got to pick
up that sucker and slay the Minotaur, but they also have to determine exactly what that is. And so we ask either, what do you want, identifying the target state, or we ask the clean language question, what would you like to have happen?
Right.
And that's the perfect world question. You know, if I could wave a magic wand and all this was fixed, what would your life look like?
Remember this, for everybody listening who isn't a professional therapist, hypnotist, coach, whatever it is, when someone's complaining about anything, that's a great question to ask. What would you like to have happen?
Perfect.
In any argument, what would you like to have happen? This will align you towards outcomes that you can both agree on.
Exactly. Nice. And we also say de-traumatize first, meaning that even if someone comes in for sports performance, you'll often find that there is an underlying trauma somewhere. When I dealt with the swimmer who went on to the Fire Police Games and won 6 gold medals, his trauma was he kept missing his final turn, and it made him feel like crap.
Yep, it could be the gymnast who had a perfect routine, but the dismount sucked.
Yes, and then she was afraid to get back on, the uneven bars or whatever it is. And you've got to take away the trauma, take away the fear, so you create that tabula rasa, that clean slate, so you have a starting point.
And we do, of course, we teach that inside of the Architecture of Change, the Architecture of Hypnosis, the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy. So study from us if you want to learn more about that. But de-traumatization is an important thing. You want to take away the negative emotional charge of past events. You don't take away the memory. This is probably a really good point to make here. A lot of times people will email in and say, can you make me forget my ex-girlfriend? Or can you make me, whatever it is, it could be forget that I ever used to smoke. But a lot of the times it's relationship. I want to forget that I ever had this relationship. That's not useful. Well, what you want instead, they don't know it. It's the Steve Jobs. I'll give you what you need, not what you claim that you want. Right?
Well, it was funny because Bandler used to say, I don't give my clients what they want. I give them what they need. But that has been...
Maybe he got it from Steve Jobs.
He might have. That's been ripped apart by the hypnosis community because the implication is that his conscious mind can determine what the unconscious mind of the other person requires.
A lot of the times it's just due to ignorance, though. People will say, can you help me forget so-and-so, right? Former relationship.
Yeah, wouldn't it be better if you just didn't care?
That's what they think that they want because that's what they have heard about hypnosis. And that's not what you want. You don't want to forget this stuff. You simply want to remember it without the emotional charge. And that's what de-traumatization is.
Nice. Very nice.
All right.
So we take away the bad kinesthetic. Building resources. So this is sort of the antithesis of de-traumatizing. We clear the slate, and now we build the positive resources. We find empowering states for them and things they're good at that we can map across into the problems and so on.
You can think of it, taking the electrical metaphor. if something has a negative charge and you neutralize that negative charge, now you're building a positive charge on top of it, right? Something that will attract you towards whatever it is that you're building towards.
Yes. And I always end with, it's the one distinction I got from a book by a particular psychiatrist. Not saying that psychiatrists have nothing to offer. We have very good friends and students who are psychiatrists, like Christoph and Adam. But this one book, really didn't get much from it, but his final point was what he ends a session with. And I love this. We're starting by saying, what do you want or what do you like to have happen? He ends by saying, what's next? Now, when you say to a client, what's next? You're basically indirectly asking them, what are you going to do now?
Exactly. It puts, again, it realigns them for being at cause rather than at effect. So it lines up with the be at cause thing.
Nice.
What's next? It's you are responsible for the momentum in your own life and continuing this action. So what is next for you? But we simplify. What's next?
Exactly.
2 freaking words that are so powerful. Okay, so we have to start going through this in a little bit more detail about we'll call it the
let's say
the 6 steps.
The 7 steps.
Yeah, and then we had a wrap up for the course, which is step number 7. But basically,
so it's
let's talk about this. For those who want to go further, let me just recommend that you check out our Architecture of Change class. It's online. It's available at MikeMandelHypnosis.com/AOC, which simply stands for Architecture of Change. MikeMandelHypnosis.com/AOC.
And that's one L in Mandel, boys and girls.
Yeah, all right.
Now, we've talked about screening the clients in advance, which is step 1.
So first thing that's going to happen is a client is going to reach out to you. Now, whether you're a therapist that has published a phone number or a website, or they've just emailed you, a lot of the times the referrals we get these days, it's just people who find us online and they say, hey, Mike and Chris, can you help me with X? And you need to screen your client in advance.
Right.
So
you want to find out in advance whether or not this is going to be a good fit.
Right.
Not just whether you can help, but whether it's going to be a good fit for both of you.
Yeah.
There has to be this sort of relationship, short-term relationship, all transference and things, but you don't want to find out when they're in their office and they're in your office and they've paid and halfway through the session, oh, this isn't going to work. You want to know that in advance. You can send them to someone else.
And so simply put, the way that Mike and I think about this, and I know our friend Jason Lynette is actually doing this in his own business too at Virginia Hypnosis. You do not want to get on the phone with anyone. You don't want to be writing them back, email back and forth, nothing until they have given you sufficient information to convince you that they're serious and that you want to work with them.
So this could be an online form they have to fill in?
Yeah, that's probably the easiest way. These days, there's so many different tools. And again, things change, so we're not going to get into any of the details on what tools to use. But just think about it. You want people filling out some sort of form to give you some basic information about what they want. You want to design that intake system so that people are taking responsibility for their own change, i.e. you're building in those first few steps of the Mandel model right away. What is the situation you want to work with? What is it that you want? We teach in the Architecture of Change some of the basics around the instant influence process and how you can bake that into some of your intake.
By just reaffirming their autonomy. If they feel like they don't have to change, people are more liable to change, amazingly.
So
because no one likes to be told what to do.
Exactly. So step 1, you're going to get some information from an online form before you ever have a conversation with the client. Now, step 2 for some people can be something like a 20-minute consultation that you do for free. And this is really you determining, okay, am I going to go forward? Do I need to sell the process, right? Because if you're doing this for money, not everybody's going to say, oh, okay, I filled out your intake form. Now here's the money for the session. They might want to talk to you. That's fine.
But Chris, this brings up another point that I know it's driven both of us kind of insane, which means we need therapy. When somebody would we always say we have a phone number and on our website, and you can phone and leave a message, and we make it very clear we will leave your email address because that's how we're going to respond. We honestly do not have time to phone everybody back. We just do not. We don't want our lives to be that complex. And every now and then, somebody will leave a message and say, oh, I don't want to respond by email, but I need about a half-hour conversation with you to discuss my issues. And we
delete. See, that is what we're talking about intake or screening, right?
Yes.
That is a screen that's saying, this is someone who's expecting more from me up front than I am willing to give. Now, that is not a judgment, okay? That doesn't mean the person is a bad person. but we're just not the right
know.
therapist / hypnotist / whatever. So in my case, I do not see that many clients, but the ones that I do see, I primarily do intake automated. I get the information, get the payment up front, and then I do not speak to the client on the phone until at all, actually. We do the sessions via Zoom. I do not speak to the client until the session. Right.
Unless they're threatening you with physical violence or something like that.
That's a topic for another podcast.
It is. No, this is interesting because here's how weird this can get to those of you listening. I got a very nice email from someone in another country. I won't say which one, but let's just say it wasn't Canada or the U.S. I got an email from someone very nicely put together, very friendly and very respectful, asking would I please look at
handwriting.
The handwriting. I don't even know if it was a male or female or undecided or whatever. Anyway,
irrelevant.
The person wanted me to look at the writing and just see what I could pull out of it and sent me 3 scans of their writing. And, I'm on vacation up at the cabin. I said, yeah, I'll look at this. It'll take me a little while before I'm going to get to it. It's like, yeah, take care of this right away. And I've been doing graphology for 25 years. I don't want to have to just sit down and do this. Chris is giving me the hurry up sign, and it's just making me drag my feet
Ken Sweatman.
passive aggressively. Yeah. So Ken Sweatman said to me, anyway, so I said, yeah, well, I looked at the guy's writing or the girl's writing, whoever, told the key points, was bang on, of course, and got an email back almost immediately saying, thank you so much. I really appreciate this, sir. And I said, you're welcome. Like, blessings to you. Good luck. Which is a nice thing to say. I get another email an hour later saying, I don't know if this is not the sort of question I should be asking, but would you be willing to send me an iPhone?
And here's my physical address.
Here's my address. Mail me an iPhone. And I can only presume it's because I answered one of them from my iPhone, and under my signature it says sent from my awesome iPhone.
I just thought it was a brilliant compliance set. Do this for me, okay? Thank you for your help. Oh,
so
yeah.
I sent him an iPhone 6S.
Yeah, of course you did.
Yeah.
Why are you so cheap? Just buy him or her a Tesla, Mike.
Yeah. You told me that.
Buy him a Tesla.
We deal with all kinds of stuff.
All right. Anyway, I want to make it very clear because we've got to move on with all of this. The Screen Your Clients is really about implementing a process so you are not over-investing your time. And I don't want to say wasting your time. It's totally up to you.
No.
If you're brand new, maybe you want to go through that process.
Practice.
You've got to waste your time in order to know how not to waste your time in the future. You've got to fall down in order to learn how to get back up and run again, right?
Yes.
So, but once you're at the point where you don't want to get on the phone just to do basic information gathering, automate that. Do that through a form.
Right.
Then decide, okay, am I taking that next step to get on the phone for a free 20-minute consult, 15-minute consult because I'm going to sell the process?
The whole thing, yeah.
Or am I just going to send back a reply that says, wonderful, thank you, yes, I can help you. Here's my online calendar, schedule yourself in. Here's the payment link, whatever it is.
Here's your iPhone.
Yeah, and here's your iPhone. Okay, so and then part 2, we won't have time to go into this, Mike, but you recommend people get if you're going to do a client session, get a one-page, one paragraph written on regular paper, piece of a sample, I should say, of
sample
their handwriting.
Unlined paper, signed and dated, and this will show you things like depression, suicidal tendencies.
It'll help you understand
a lot of predisposition of violence, stuff you know whether or not you want this person in your office.
Yeah, in 1 or 2 minutes of looking at their handwriting, you'll have a good sense of what could be some key issues. Okay, moving on. So that's step 1, screen your clients. Step 2, preparation. This is really more about either the phone call that you're doing with the client, if you're going to do a free phone call type of thing, or in my case, let's say right when we're in an online meeting, or if you're a in-person office type person, right when the person shows up in your office, it's the questions and the conversation that you're going to have. They're going to give you some important information to know how to work with them hypnotically.
Nice.
So we have some intake questions, some of the instant influence process.
Right. You maybe set up some seating suggestions there on how they're going to feel better. And all
using
of these
some
things.
embedded commands.
Which brings us to 3, which is the actual change work. And here is where I would fall into I use hypnosis in almost every session.
Do you want to put
it's like breathing to me.
I know we are running out of time, but did you want to mention at all, Mike, about some of the intake questions that we could ask? Let's give people
yeah, sure.
We can throw some more in the show notes, I suppose, but why don't we just ask, let's say let's go through the list of suggested questions, a few of the suggested questions.
Okay, well, yeah, let's just do a couple.
Okay.
Because we have a lot of stuff to do today.
I want to make sure this is useful for people, so we don't want to overrush
of course.
it.
So some of the questions I've used are, What have you done in the past to fix this? Because I want to know what's
This will let you know
helped.
what didn't work.
Yeah, what worked and what didn't work.
Yeah, what has helped, if anything, would be another question.
If the person said, well, I've been for hypnosis 3 times and, it's never worked at all. Hypnosis would not be the first thing I'd be going to unless I was doing it in a disguised form like mindscaping or something, calling it
Exactly.
guided imagery, whatever. In fact, funny thing, Michael C. Anthony had a hypnosis show on New Year's Eve once with a drunken crowd going on stage right after midnight. He didn't want to do this. He said the show sucked. This is many, many years ago. And the person said, yeah, it sucked last year. We had a hypnotist too. I said, oh, thanks for telling me when I get off
So
stage.
hopefully he'll use that
Yeah.
to fix his
So,
client's screening going
exactly.
forward, right? Okay, next one would be what has made it worse, if anything.
Yeah,
So it's
you
the
wanna know
opposite of
that.
what helped. That's pushing you towards the solution.
And
then
wanna
what
find
made it
out
worse?
consequences, like what will happen if you fix this.
Right.
Now, you don't want to say when. I don't think you want to build in that presupposition that it's going to be fixed in this case. You want to find out. Gil Boyne does this wonderfully, or did. God bless him, he's dead. But Gil Boyne was great. If someone said, well, I can't be hypnotized, I can't go into a deep trance. One of our students is saying this right now. And his way of fixing it, I don't know if you've ever watched him work, Chris. It's very clever. He'd say, I want you to complete this sentence. If I go into a deep trance, well, if I go into a deep trance, I'll lose control. Okay, complete it with a different ending.
Yeah.
And he'd force them to explore all the reasons they don't want to do it.
Until they depotentiate the negativity.
All the negative stuff,
Right.
and then he would zone them through the floor.
Right. So another way you could say is imagine that this problem is solved. In what ways is your life better now? In what ways is your life worse now?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
That'll get to both. Like if you
Sure.
fix this problem,
Sure.
some good things will happen, but also some bad things will happen. I remember, for example, one woman that I was working with that had a trauma and was clear to me that if she resolved the trauma, she'd have to go back to a job because she wouldn't be on short-term disability.
Yep.
She hated the job.
Yeah.
Well, we had to get over that issue first, right? And frame that as a short-term problem that would resolve a long-term negativity in her life.
It's so bang on, Chris, because some people, they actually hug their pain because they get their identity from their pain. They've had it for so long. And if they get rid of their pain, they don't know who to be.
Yeah, and that one of the questions here we have is what does this problem permit you to not do? Well, in the case of something that is giving somebody short-term disability, it permits them to not go to work, right, and still get
Yes,
paid.
yes.
Let's say. So those are some.
What does it permit you to do? Well, it permits me to stay at home all day, eat pizza, and watch television.
So those are some intake
Find
questions.
the benefits.
We'll move back on to the rest of the show
Yeah,
here,
sure.
but those are some suggestions. Now we get to the change work. Now I don't think we're going to have a ton of time to go through details on how to do the
let's
change
just
work.
touch on these and say with change work can be anything. It could be hypnosis. I use almost every session just because it's just what I do. Even if I'm doing something else, I'll throw in some hypnosis at the end. I may use NLP. I may use NLP New Code. May do my 6-step tapping. I'm not using BSAP Free Fast anymore. I've just found other things are working better for me. Maybe timeline therapy. I may use kinetic shift. So there's a wide variety of things. You're going to choose your change work at the time based on what's presenting. You're not going to plan in advance.
And again, if you're just, let's call you an average Joe or Joanne, not a hypnotist, not a therapist, just a normal person living a normal life with friends that have problems, you can just tell stories. You can do hypnosis in the form of metaphors. You can do all kinds of things. You can just ask really good questions, and that can be the change work.
Which brings us to number 4. Check your frickin' work.
Right.
If you fix things, you want to know they're fixed. It's no different than when people are afraid to check their hypnosis in case, well, what if it doesn't work? Well, if it doesn't work, it means you're not doing a good job. You're not doing something properly. You've missed something. There's no danger in checking your work. And James Tripp is all about this. And I totally respect him for that he really says, check your frickin' work with people. Like, don't just presume. You send them home, they seem happy, and then their problem is still there. It's become context anchored to the therapy room, and they go home and they're no better. You can check your work by future pacing is the simplest way.
It's one simple way to do it, right?
Or you can set up idiomotor signals. Is the problem resolved? Yes. If you get a no, you still got more work to do. Or if you're doing mindscaping, it's built in automatically. The checking the work, it's just, you'll see their whole state has changed as they're leaving. Anything left to be done? No, nothing.
So you can imagine this as the typical, let's say, typical pub conversation. Your friend's worried about a conversation that he needs to have with his boss the next morning, and he's really freaked out about how the boss might respond. You start doing some preparation intake questions about, well, what'll happen after you have this conversation, or what will happen if you don't have this conversation. You get all that information, and then you, I don't know, maybe guide them through a quick NLP exercise or something over a pint of beer.
Sure, yeah.
And the next question is, so imagine that it's tomorrow morning. You've walked into your boss's office. How do you feel different now?
Mm-hmm.
And
What's
they
that
go,
going to be like?
and you can calibrate on their face. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I totally see how I have to have this conversation, or it's going to wreck my career.
Or if they go,
you know?
it'll be
You're
okay,
gonna know.
it'll
You're
be
gonna know
better.
through calibration.
That's not strong enough.
So there's your checking your work just in terms of everyday situations.
Now, you might give them step 5 homework. That's entirely optional. If someone's dealing with anxiety, I will teach them the 6-step tapping just to keep depotentiating it. I'll show them how to do the triple warmer tapping on the back of the hand to bring empowered ego states to the executive. So we didn't do today, Chris.
And if you're a client, if you're doing work with clients for money, and this is your business, then it's probably a good idea to be assigning people homework. First, for two main reasons. One, it's going to help them. Two, it's going to give you a reason to follow up, to check on how are you doing with your homework. Because we can get to step 6. The final step really is when you follow up, which is totally up to you, you can figure out, have they solved their issue? Okay, if they have, wonderful. Now you have an opportunity to do one of, let's say, 3 things. Number 1, get them to come back for the next major issue in their life. Think about your life as a boat with some holes. You know, you've got a bailing bucket to get the water out of the boat, but you probably are better off sealing the hole, right? Plug that hole.
Yep.
So, and then of course build a stronger engine or build a bigger sail or whatever it is, whatever the metaphor is for velocity and momentum. If you can find out what is that next issue and you've helped the person already solve something, they're likely to come back. If they don't have any other major issues, they are likely to refer you to family, friends, etc. And they may very well be willing to give you a testimonial or write a review for you.
Yes, nice. That's a really good point, Chris. And testimonials, reviews, it's word of mouth will be your biggest selling point.
It probably doesn't need to be said. It's obvious that when somebody has had a great result, those are the people who you want to ask for reviews, referrals, testimonials. If somebody says, you know, man, the problem's no better. In fact, I'm smoking more than ever. You know, you're probably not going to say, hey, would you write a review for me online?
You done something wrong there. Yeah.
Just obvious stuff.
What are you doing to wrap it up, Chris?
So, wrap up. Well, that is the wrap up.
I'm asking you to wrap up the list.
Yeah, that is the wrap up of the list right there.
And this is a thumbnail sketch of the entire training of the architecture of change. It just gives an overview when we go into these things in considerable depth. I just want to ask you, though, what's the empowering question for today?
All right. So the empowering question. Ask yourself, what sort of architecture does my present state resemble or remind me of? And what kind of building best illustrates the empowerment I desire? And how will I construct it now?
Ooh.
All right.
Well, I had a Meta 5 for you, but I've changed it. I've changed it to the 3 suns and the 3 ships.
Okay, I like it.
You don't know this one, do you?
Nope.
I've not actually told it recently. Ever, in fact. But once upon a time, there was a wealthy merchant who had 3 sons, and he had ships for his 3 sons. And as he was building his business, he got this remarkable idea of sending the 2 eldest sons out, each with a huge frigate loaded with carpets and textiles and wool, out into the world to see what trade they could do and come back with money. And his 3rd son, also the young son, wanted to participate. The father laughed and showed him his ship, and it was small and rickety and basically leaky, and there wasn't even any proper ballast, just some old sacks in the bottom. And he said, here's what you can do. He said, go out with nothing. And he said, go and sail until you reach the place where the sun does not rise in December. And the son took the offer, and he sailed south, and he went further and further. 3 times 3 months he sailed, and came to a land with an enormous mountain of snow, an island. He went ashore, but the snow wasn't snow. It was something he'd never encountered. It was salt. And he filled all the burlap sacks that were used as ballast and reballasted the ship with sacks of salt and began sailing back. And after a while, he needed food and put ashore in another kingdom. And he went ashore and said, I've something to trade. This. They said, what's that? He said, it's this white powder. I call it salt. They said, we don't want this. So he went into the royal kitchens, and he spoke to the chef and the cooks, and he put some in the meat they were cooking, and some in the stew, and some in the soup, and even some in the custard. And the king arose the next day, went to his morning feast, and was overjoyed at all the food suddenly tasted so remarkably good. And so for every sack of salt, he gave the young man a sack of gold.
Thanks, everybody. This has been Brain Software episode 136. Hurrah! That's awesome. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you're interested in more about crafting hypnosis sessions, change work sessions as a therapist, I already said that. A hypnotist. Mike, did I say a hypnotist?
I think you might
Is
have.
this getting weird? Is it weird now?
Totally weird, bud.
Check out MikeMandelHypnosis.com/AOC, which, reminder, stands for Architecture of Change.
It's all there.
And you'll love it. It's a really great class. It was 8 hours of class time, but it was, of course, edited down, excluding the breaks and excluding the client practice, the practice sessions that all the students did. So it's 5 hours of high definition video, 2 camera angles, great audio, great video, and it's ready for you.
And come to Toronto, November, Architecture Hypnosis. Come and hang out with us. There's still a few spots left.
All right. And
Good night! Ba-ba-ba.
woohoo, Chino.
Yeah!
All right.
Under the cover of night, she crawls into sight. Her skin a cold china white, 'cause she's a dark angel wearing dark glasses. Shadows and the long false lashes.
Oh, these are good.
Victory!